Looking back on the early 2010s, we remember a lot of talent from guys like Justin Blackmon and Amari Cooper, but one guy who no doubt left his mark on that era of football, yet seems to be forgotten about, is Ryan Switzer. This dude was cold, and the amount of production he put up for North Carolina was crazy, seeing as he had a major presence in the receiving and return game. In this video, we go over the football career of Ryan Switzer and the impact he had on North Carolina as well as college football. So let's get into it. So first, we're going to quickly touch on what he did in high school just because it's very impressive and worth mentioning. Ryan attended George Washington High School in West Virginia and balled out to say the least. Throughout his total high school career, he had over 8,100 all-purpose yards and over 100 touchdowns. And although he would go on to primarily play receiver in college, he put up 2,379 rushing yards on 206 carries with 32 touchdowns in his senior year alone. Along with that, he had 20 catches for 253 yards and 4 touchdowns. On defense, he also made his presence known by taking 3 interceptions to the house, and I couldn't find out for a certain fact that he was the return specialist for his high school team, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that he was, looking at what he did at North Carolina. So considering that, we can see that he made an impact in every way he could. This performance all throughout high school led to a numerous amount of awards and accolades, which include being named a first-team parade All-American, the 2-time winner of the Kennedy Award, which is given to the West Virginia Player of the Year. Along with that, he was also the 2-time West Virginia Gatorade Player of the Year, 2-time Conference Player of the Year, 3-time First-Team All-State, and 2-time First-Team All-State captain. So although this is West Virginia we're talking about, there's absolutely no denying that he was a dog in high school. This performance made Ryan the #1 player in the state of West Virginia and the 22nd ranked athlete in the country. Now, this is a ranking that Ryan himself earned in every way, and you may say that all recruits earn their rankings themselves, which is true, but here's the reason I point out Ryan's. Like I just mentioned, he came out of West Virginia and played at a 3A school. Now, I'm not a college recruiter, but I'm going to assume that any college recruiter that sees a 5'10" white kid out of West Virginia playing against 3A schools is not going to be naturally attracted to that. But after what he did on the gridiron for his entire high school career, it was impossible for coaches and recruiters to just look away. So I just want to point that out and give credit to Ryan for showing out and not letting his team or location stop him from making a name for himself. So being the #1 player in the state, he actually was still a 3-star, which emphasizes how hard it is to get recruited out of states like West Virginia. But anyway, he had plenty of offers and decided to commit to North Carolina. At North Carolina, he did not waste any time getting his college career off the ground, because although he would not make a huge impact in the receiving game yet, he did a whole lot of damage as the return specialist. And it's actually crazy because he did what I'm about to explain all within the last 2 months of the season. His first punt return touchdown came in the second week in November against Virginia, which had to be a great moment with it being his first collegiate touchdown. But he would recreate that feeling the next week against Pittsburgh when he took 2 punt returns to the house in the same game, which is crazy. But it didn't stop there, because the next week against Old Dominion, he took another one to the house. So just to quickly recap, this true freshman out of West Virginia had now taken 4 punts to the house in 3 games. Absolutely nuts. And if you thought he was done, he was definitely not, as in the last game of the season, North Carolina was faced up against Cincinnati in the Belk Bowl, and this dude took his 5th punt return touchdown of the year, 86 yards. With that punt return, he established an ACC record and tied an NCAA record with 5 punt return touchdowns in a season. Along with his ability as a returner, he also made an impact at receiver, hauling in 32 receptions for 341 yards and 3 touchdowns. But it was his returning ability that got him named first team All-ACC as a specialist, which was a huge accomplishment. Going into his sophomore year, I think the coaching staff realized that this dude was too good to use primarily as a return specialist, so with that, Ryan's role at receiver was increased. He didn't do anything super crazy, but still had a really solid year with 61 receptions for 757 yards and 4 touchdowns. As the punt returner, he had 37 returns for 172 yards, which was a step down from the previous year, but it was expected looking as his role at receiver increased. The next season was slightly better from a statistical standpoint, At receiver, he had 54 receptions for 693 yards and 6 touchdowns, which were all team highs. He added to that as a returner with 22 punt returns for 302 yards and 2 touchdowns. So just to point it out, he dominated as a returner in his freshman year, dominated as a receiver in his sophomore year, and then in his junior year accomplished both. But everything came together for him in his senior season, and for good reason. He had dominated for 3 years as both a receiver and a returner, and it only made sense that he went out with a great senior season. Dude hauled in 96 receptions for 1,112 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now that might not seem significant at first look, but it helps to know that at the time, Ryan was only the 3rd player in North Carolina history to exceed 1,000 receiving yards on the year. Since then, guys like Josh Downs, Daz Newsome, and De'Ame Brown have joined that club, but it was very recently that those guys joined. So taking a look over his whole college career, this dude set the school record for career receptions with 244, career receiving yards with 2,903, career punt return yards with 1,082, career punt return touchdowns with 7, and single season receptions with 96 in that final year. I don't know about y'all, but that resume gives him a case as the best player in North Carolina history. And the only reason I say a case is because recently we've seen guys like Sam Howell and Drake May come through North Carolina, and even guys before Ryan like Julius Peppers. But those guys play different positions, so it's hard to compare careers. But one thing that is for sure is that he has an argument for the best player in North Carolina history. And even looking past his stats, the dude was just one of the most exciting players to watch play the game. He was a threat to take it to the house every time he fielded a punt, and was equally dangerous at receiver. So his time in the NFL was not that significant, but he stuck around for a while, so I'm just going to hit the big parts of his time in the NFL. He was selected by the Cowboys in the 4th round of the 2017 draft and did okay for his first year. He was primarily the return specialist for the team and finished the season with 256 punt return yards and a touchdown, which was an 83-yard return against the Redskins in late November. He added to that with 600 kickoff return yards, leading the team in both punt and kick return yards. Fast forward to April 2018, the Cowboys acquired Tavon Austin and 2 more receivers, so they traded Ryan to the Raiders. But it actually worked out because he was reuniting with the specialist coach that he had been with on the Cowboys. But that didn't work out, and he was traded to Pittsburgh a couple months later. In Pittsburgh during that 2018 season, he basically repeated what he had done the previous year, seeing as he had 252 yards on 30 punt returns and 607 yards on 30 kick returns, but unfortunately no touchdowns. But as a receiver, he made a sizable impact as he had 36 receptions for 253 yards and 1 touchdown. But after that season is when his career started to rapidly decline. The next season in 2019, he was placed on IR for a back injury that hindered him from getting reactivated to the roster, and he ended up being released in September of 2020. He then joined the Browns practice squad, but that didn't lead to anything and would eventually lead to him announcing his retirement from the game in July of 2022. As we look at Ryan's football career in its entirety, I just want to point out a couple things. This was a 3-star athlete who came out of West Virginia and probably had a lot of doubters going into college looking at his size and the level of competition he played against in high school. Despite that, dude came to North Carolina and dominated from day one until the Senior Bowl. Then in the NFL, although he wasn't as dominant as he was at North Carolina, we still saw flashes of his ability. Regardless of his stats and accolades though, like I mentioned, he was one of the most exciting players to watch and one of the most reliably consistent players as well. His legacy will no doubt be cemented at UNC for years to come, and I'm very glad that we were able to witness a talent like his while it was on display. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this one. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like and share the video as that helps the channel to grow. Besides that, until next time.